Welcome to today's presentation. My name is Rob Elder. I'm Vice President of Data Centers at Bulk Infrastructure. And today I'm going to talk about the sustainable energy solutions and the impact on data centers. Initially, I'll just give you a brief introduction to Bulk, and then I'll talk about the benefits of the Nordic region. And then we'll look at the implications of the energy transition across both Europe as well as the Nordics. And then I'll touch a little bit on sustainability performance more broadly and how that relates back to data centers. Just to introduce you to Bulk Infrastructure. So Bulk Infrastructure Group itself consists of 3 business areas. All of those business areas are underpinned by the same principles. They are focused on sustainable solutions. They are fundamentally infrastructure based. They offer scalability or developed at scale. And they're either serving directly or located within the Nordic region. So our industrial real estate business is focused on logistics, and to date we've developed over 400,000 square meters of industrial buildings. Our data center business located in Norway and Denmark today consists of 3 sites I'll talk about in just a moment. And our fiber networks business is developing both subsea and terrestrial fiber networks connecting intra-Nordic and also international markets. So just taking a closer look at our data center business, we operate 3 facilities across the Nordic region. We have in Oslo the Oslo Internet Exchange. It's one of the most densely populated for carriers, both international and domestic carriers in the Nordic region. We have Kristiansand, which is the N01 campus heading south on the very southern tip of Norway. Located next to the Kristiansand transformer station, which is one of the largest transformer stations in Europe. We're able to scale up to over 1 gigawatts of power, and that's spread out across multiple zones covering 3 square kilometers. And then we also have down into Denmark, on the western flank of Denmark in Esbjerg, we have DK01. This campus provides direct connection into a number of subsea networks. It's a key access point for international and regional networks landing on the western flank of Denmark and accessing the Nordic region. In addition to our data center business, as I mentioned, we also run a fiber networks business focused at the infrastructure layer. We're delivering subsea and terrestrial fiber networks, connecting both our own facilities, but also connecting across to the US using the Havru cable system, which then via the North Sea connects directly into Norway and also down into Denmark to our DK01 facility. And also more recently building a southern route out of Norway directly into Denmark and then extending a terrestrial network down towards our facility again at DK01. So multiple systems here represented, but just to give you an indication of the focus on unlocking the Nordics and also in the number of interconnected and multiple diverse routes available now into and in and around the Nordics. I'll now just touch on some of the benefits of the Nordic region. Some of these are fairly well known, but I just want to explain a little bit about the benefits of the region as a whole. So we all know about the renewable energy potential of the Nordics, and today actually it represents around 70% of all of the energy production in the region. Clearly dominated by hydro, but there are other sources such as wind and nuclear, particularly in Sweden and Finland. Norway tops the bill there in relation to renewable, given its huge abundance of hydro. In fact, it represents 98% of the energy production in Norway is renewable. But over the next number of years, we see a shift in the dynamics of the renewable mix within the Nordic region. There is a huge increase forecasted, as we've already seen, in wind, and that's going to likely dominate in the next few decades. And as a percentage overall, also we see nuclear reducing significantly, as clearly existing nuclear plants, particularly again in Sweden and Finland, are decommissioned. So the overall mix is likely to increase clearly as a percentage, but with much more focus on wind. So in addition to the energy mix itself, the other thing which is a feature of the Nordic power setup is clearly there is a surplus, unlike other areas. And you can see here how that surplus is forecast to change over time. Norway represents again the largest proportion of that due to its abundance of hydro. but that is going to change over time, and also as the energy mix changes as well, then there's going to be the need to balance production and consumption, where there's a less predictable and less aligned energy mix. Obviously, that's matched by an increase in electrification across multiple sectors, which is going to need additional investment in more energy production. So, you've got this mix here where we see the increase in electrification, which is a key part of reducing carbon emissions, at the same time as varying demand and varying production as well. The other factor to consider is the impact of power interconnectors. This year commissioned has been the new power connector from Norway to Germany, and in testing at the moment is the UK Norway link as well. So that's going to have an interesting dynamic, not just on capacity, but also actually on pricing. So it's well known that the Nordics in general have some of the lower prices available in Europe, but it is a multifaceted and dynamic marketplace. So here you can see a graph which just represents unit cost for energy consumption, energy pricing across some of the European markets. It's worth pointing out this doesn't include taxes and levies, and the difference is forecast to increase, particularly in peak years moving into the future. So when you factor in the impact of some of those taxes and levies, the cost difference can actually be, and we've seen this, north of 60%. So there is some significant differences. But other factors such as these interconnectors that I mentioned will have an impact on price. And across Europe, due to the increase in CO2 and increased power and hydrogen production, these are all factors which we see leading to increasing pricing overall. Also, obviously, the fluctuation in weather conditions, particularly again in the Nordics, has an impact on price regarding, particularly hydro, etc. So, there's a number of different factors which influence the unit cost of pricing. And then we've seen as well in Norway where there's new tariffs being introduced to try to disperse and spread the demand use throughout the day, where perhaps capacity overall isn't an issue, but at certain times of day you start to find there's more reliance or more need for energy at certain times. So you'll start to see tactical tariffs and regional policies adopted to try to deal with not just pricing issues, but also production and capacity issues. So just to have a quick look at some of the implications of the energy transition within Europe now. Clearly, the decarbonisation of the energy system across Europe is a key priority when we look at the European Green Deal. And with that, we see obviously replacing existing fossil fuels with renewables, and there's a huge focus on that with wind as well as solar, but a large proportion is wind. And at the same time, we see a big increase in demand for power through the electrification of many different industries. So we're at this period of quite a lot of change, and we're in the middle of that transition at the moment. And the interesting dynamic when you look at the market is that therefore means we're moving from a power system where the production adapts to the consumption to actually something where now we see consumption having to change to adapt to the production. And with the increase of more renewables and wind, particularly, that's going to become an increasing feature of the European energy landscape and energy mix moving forward. And with that variable increase in demand, we see there the need to be a lot more flexible. And, in terms of how you approach these different challenges, we're going to need to consider access to adequate and available land to accommodate this new increase in renewables. And at the same time, investing in and the development of new technologies, not just in terms of power production and distribution, but actually in terms of matching that the consumption with the production through different flexible solutions. So that's going to be an interesting area for future technology development. And then a lot of this is going to be around how consumers of this energy adapt and modify their businesses to again, deal with this match-up between consumption and production. And I think we'll start to see new business opportunities and changes in some of the technologies available. And that's something particularly within the data center space we're going to have to consider, particularly as we see an increase in electrification across other industries as well. So we'll see an increase in power demand clearly as we see electrification across multiple sectors. It's not just the data center space. And it's important that as an industry we understand that there are other industries going through the same process, and with this increased electrification is going to introduce both, I guess, opportunities as well as some challenges. Obviously challenges related to potential shortfalls in capacity in certain areas, which is going to lead to, as we see, potential both opportunities, which could be for increased revenue through schemes such as FFR, fast frequency response, where we maybe utilize some on-site power generation, and data centers can act as an opportunity for coming off grid to free up capacity. And then there's also clearly levers that governments have to be able to introduce different taxes or levies on certain workloads at certain times a day, and in fact potentially dependent upon what kind of activity as a business you are undertaking. So it could be the case that the socio as well as economic impact of what you do is taken into consideration when legislators are looking at different ways in which they balance and manage the use of the power demand within their given area. So as we see moving forward, this whole landscape becomes quite complex. It's certainly something which is going to require quite a bit of flexibility, and it's important for the data center sector to realize that this surplus and this demand moving forward is going to change, and that clearly we're working alongside other competing sectors for this increased power. And just to conclude, I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainability performance. I think most people are now familiar with the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and it's important to know, as we see an increased, tighter, more integrated energy market, I think there's an absolute desire and a focus on sustainable performance, both more broadly but also within the data center sector. And it's important to consider not just, I suppose, tactical solutions, but that we're looking at contributing across the value chain to society more broadly. And that's where companies and industries need to work together, and we look at the whole sustainable digital infrastructure sector as a whole in order to enable this low emission economy. It's not just one part that needs to do something, it's working together. And obviously from a data center perspective, there's a number of best practices that are already well defined and are well adopted by many in the industry. But energy efficiency is something which has been worked on a lot over the last decade particularly, and I think most companies see this as being something which has been largely addressed in terms of how we operate. But now we're seeing much more focus on the recycling of heat, the integration of data centers into district heating and other uses for that heat. We're looking at diversity, preserving biodiversity, so where we're developing these facilities moving forward, but actually also looking at the circular aspects of data center economies and where we can utilize existing infrastructure and we can reuse certain elements of the whole stack in order to reduce the carbon impact on what we do. But I think largely the biggest area of focus, and this is something which we're very keen to promote, is transparency. It's about being open and about being clear on what you're planning to do and how you're achieving against those plans. So just taking a look at what Bulk are doing. Bulk are aiming to develop the most sustainable data centers, and being located in the Nordics, we provide clearly a direct opportunity to benefit from the renewable energy mix. But it goes way beyond that. And the focus is not just on environmental, but also socio and economic as well. So just taking a closer look at that, what we are setting out to do and what we've already started is to set clear targets related to environmental aspects. And what we will do is set ourselves a budget and put in place an action plan to both implement the necessary measures and measure ourselves against those measures related to environmental targets. And that's across the whole business, but clearly the data center part of our business is a big focus. Outside of the environmental aspects, we are also focusing on the socio and economic targets as well. So in conjunction with our colleagues in the other parts of our business, this is looking at our holistic overall operations and where we put in place certain measures through policy, through ways of working, both as a business and with our suppliers and with our customers, to focus not just on the environmental aspects but also on the broader socio parts as well. So this is something I think we're going to see an increase for in both our sector but also from our customers, demanding to see both evidence of what you're doing but also transparency on how you're performing against those targets. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and you should find my contact details on the next slide, and hopefully hear from you all very soon. Many thanks.